You asked for it. You got it. It's our Auction Strategy Bonanza 2024 edition. A full episode dedicated to everything you need to know about fantasy baseball auctions. How to bid, how to prepare, how to nominate, and everything in between. Kick back, relax, and enjoy one of our yearly staple episodes next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, and we have come to one of our staple podcasts for the year. It is our Auction Strategy podcast. You've asked for it. You've waited for it. All things auction, strategy, the whole way. And actually, Ruvain came up with our following guest. He's like, hey, we should have this guy on. I'm like, oh, my God, that's the perfect person. I want a warm welcome to the show from RotoWire, Jeff Erickson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, guys. And Ruvain, thanks for suggesting me. Always appreciate it. Always good to do you guys' podcast. Always fun. So many awesome podcasts in our space right now, and I'm happy to be part of one.
Oh, fantastic. So glad you're on the show. And let's get right down to it because we have so much to talk about. And before asking specific questions, just generally, what is your general auction strategy that you come in with? What are your main rules that you live by?
Stay active. I like being involved in almost every player if possible. You know, it does a couple of things. One, keeps me attuned to what it gives me a feel for the values in the auction. Two, it's fun. It's enjoyable. It's a fun way to do that. And three, it kind of disguises who I'm in on and who I'm not in on. If I'm bidding on every player, within reason, you throw out a Rocky starting pitcher, okay, fine, I'll sit on my hands. But, early on especially, I think it kind of throws off the scent. Okay, he's on this guy. Whereas I think, and it's just other times it allows you also to be there when that inexplicable bargain comes up, and it happens all the time, guys. Every auction I've been a part of, there's an early lull, and a player goes for $3 to $4 cheaper than he should. Whether it's baseball or football or golf, you name it, all the auctions I've done, there's always that lull. And if you're involved in every player, well, then you're gonna have a chance to be there when the wheel goes round.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that. I mean, you've been in auctions that I participated in. I bid on almost every player because I don't want you to know whether I want a guy or not.
Right. Absolutely. And, added bonus, too. When you're bidding early and often, it speeds up the auction, too. It gives your competitors that even if it's 1 second less to think about what they want to do. I mean, granted, that requires you to be uber prepared. You need to know who you like, have a feel for the dollar values. Granted, they won't always be, you might not even be accurate with it, but I think it's a good way to get a feel for those for the room as well, and also just gives less time for your competitors.
Totally agree. All right, Ruvain, what are your main rules that you live by?
Go for a value early and often. Let the auction come to you. The values will come down. If the room is hot, the room will cool down. You will get the values later on in the draft. And always consider the auction table like a poker table. You can't be on every hand, but you can at least see the flop. You can bluff. You can do whatever you need to. You can intimidate. You can do whatever especially if it's a live auction, you can do whatever you want, just like a poker table, and you can influence the room just by the way you're bidding, by the way you're talking. There's a whole bunch of different stuff you can do that you can just take control, and you can be the main point of the auction. If you do that, you have a better chance, as long as you do all the preparation, there's a better chance of succeeding in the auction itself.
Ruvain, I got to keep you away from my poker table at First Pitch Arizona.
Oh yeah, believe it or not, I am very conservative when it comes to poker, so I'm a little bit more active when it comes to auctions. I don't mind bidding more on auctions than poker table. Poker, I hold it a little more close to the vest.
Okay,
I've actually never played poker before. Is it a good game?
Oh, it's a blast.
I'm kidding.
It's a very social game.
I just bluffed right there. See?
I see what you did there. Gotcha.
Yeah, we used to play poker all the time together, and he's one of the best bluffers out there. So yeah.
Bluffing is a big thing. So obviously, the number one rule is to have fun. I don't even consider that a rule. I think that's just that this is what we do, and so it's ingrained in it. But I'll give you 3 rules that are sort of specific. Number one, auctions are zero-sum games. If a player goes for $5 over your values, that means there has to be another player $5 under your values. So you don't have to get stuck up in, oh, everyone's going expensive. There's going to be values later. Have patience, all right? Number 2, all players should either be bought in cold sections, that's where they're going undervalued, or in hot sections by paying a smaller relative market premium. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to buy a player over value, but don't buy it as the amount you go over shouldn't be as much as everyone else. Everybody's going $4 or $5 over value. Going $1 or $2 over is fine. It's not what Larry Schechter would tell you. Larry Schechter would say if a player is worth $18, you got to bid $17.99 or less. I'm telling you it's okay to go over, but make sure that overage, that premium you're paying, is just a little bit smaller than everybody else's. And number 3, nominations matter. When you're nominating a player, you don't want to just blindly do something. You want to have a purpose. It has to be for the right reasons, and there's many ways to do it. And we'll get into a lot of that as we go, but I thought I'd just throw some general rules out to you. So, Jeff, let's talk about auctions versus snakes, versus snake draft. How do you prepare differently, or do you prepare differently for an auction than you do for a snake draft?
I mean, you have to, right? You have to. I think a couple of things you have to do. One, you have with the snake draft, there are certain players you're just not going to get, period, because of where you are in the draft order. And Ariel, I know you and I have had many conversations of where we like to be in the draft order. If you like to be in the middle, you're not getting Ronald Acuna, period. Stop, full stop, done. Whereas in an auction, you get any single player you want, but it comes with the cost, and you have to prepare yourself for that trade-off. You get to choose a little bit more about how you value the players, where you want to put some of your, how you should allocate your auction dollars, your capital is, if you will. And 3, I think you really need to focus on scarcities, whether it's scarcity of position, scarcity of a stat. These are things that you really have to focus on in your player pool. If you're in an AL only league and you're not really aware that maybe second base in that particular given year is weaker, you may be caught kind of off guard a little bit. Whereas if you're in a snake draft, maybe you don't notice it as much.
Anything to add, Ruve?
Yeah, I think when you're going into a snake draft, you have to look more at the ADP because going into a snake draft, you have an idea of where you're going to be drafting. You have an idea of basically which players are going to be available to you, so you can prepare much easier that way. When it comes to an auction, you have to have the values of every single player ready for you because you can get every single player. There's no player off limits.
I'll say I actually pay attention less to ADP in a snake as I do in an auction because I want to figure out where the hot spots were going to be, where are the pockets of value. And in a snake, I shouldn't say that I don't look at it at all. I look at it in the middle rounds. In the early rounds, I take the players who I want. I take the build that I want. I don't care if somebody's going a little bit early in the first round or second round. I take who I want. And after a certain round, after rounds 15, 17, whatever it is, I don't care if ADP is a certain watch. I want those low value players that I want. I want my guys. I do look at it in the middle because obviously you don't want to pay 3 rounds over where you should if you couldn't. But an auction, the whole thing is looking at the market, seeing where you think you're going to get the bargains from. And so the preparation is very intense of market versus value. I want to ask, how does an online auction differ from in-person? And I think they are really different animals because there's so many things going on. Jeff, what do you think? How do you think that it differs for you?
I'm vigorously shaking my head. Absolutely true. They are vastly different. For one, I mean, you're the whole +1 factor. You hit, if you hit that +1 button right after somebody does a jump bid, guess what? You're stuck with that. Whereas in an auction, in a live auction, that's never happening. That's just one thing that could just never possibly happen. You never say, you're never saying +1 and someone says 17. Some guy like me who always likes to say 17, for instance. That's just not a thing. the flip side is you have a finite amount of time. You know when that bid is going to end, unless you've got a bad connection. In which case, by the way, connection matters a heck of a lot here too.
Yeah.
And having the proper line, the proper equipment matters a lot more. It's just there's visual tells and cues that you get in the room that you can't get online. There's bidding cadences that you get in the room where you can't get online. I mean, you can kind of guess at it, but sometimes it's not even real. If you've got a little bit of a lag, you may think that somebody's going twicing you all the time, but it's really it's taking you a while to see the bid. I think you need I think it goes faster online for the most part. I mean, you've seen me be an auctioneer before. I tend to run a pretty fast auction, but I think online auctions typically are faster. It's relentless. It's bam, it's bam, it's bam. It's just going a finite amount of time, and you better be ready. So I think there's a little bit more give in person.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. It's like the difference between playing poker online versus in person. The bluffing, you're looking at somebody, you're picking up tells. I mean, I look at Jeff Zimmerman. I can tell when he's going to bid. You can see Derek Carty go, I lost that guy. He gets visually frustrated. You can see guys clicking pens. You can pick up tells from players when you're in person. And, of course, you won't miss any bids. A lot of times, especially late in the auction, I mean, it's happened to us, one player in an auction that Reuven and I did online the other day, that, you're busy doing, and all of a sudden a guy goes out, nobody bids on him, and so the clock runs out really quick, and like, oh, my goodness, did I just miss that person? Because you're looking at your papers, you're looking here.
Yep.
I would say that a big thing is having a second person is very beneficial online, because when you're at your computer screen, you really need two screens. You're looking at your numbers and your strategy, and you're writing down your bids, and you're writing down the other bids. But then you have to look at the actual auction taking place. Who's bidding what? They don't scream it out loud. It doesn't say audio, this guy bid 18, this guy bid 19, right? You have to actually look at it and press the button. So you have to be in two places at one time. If you have two people, that's a huge advantage. So I think that the benefit of a second person is more online. Anything to add, Reuven?
Yeah, also the entertainment value. If you've never done a live auction, just do one at least. You have to get the feel for it. It's nothing at all like an online auction. When you're live, you get to see the person. You can see where they're sitting, if they're looking at you, if you're looking at them, if they come in wearing a certain baseball jersey, maybe that's a tell. Sometimes, there's some people that wear only, I'm not going to say who this is, but they only wear Robinson Cano jerseys, or they only wear St. Louis Cardinals jerseys, something like that. You have a better idea of who they're going to bid on just on the way they look. You can't do that on the computer. There's no way you can do that. You can also get a feel for the room better, just in general, when things are slowing down, when people are starting to get tired. Also, it's a matter of doing it when you're doing the auction. A lot of the online auctions are usually in the afternoon, evening. Me and you, Ira, we used to do the auction, the NFPC auction in the morning, 9 a.m. 9 a.m. is a great time. Half the people are half asleep. You can get an idea of who's actually with it, who's not with it, and it gives you so much more an advantage just because you can see how other people are either to your advantage, playing against you for your advantage or against you.
By the way, for the record, Jeff, I wasn't one of the ones who recommended to switch Tout Wars head-to-head to the morning. That just happened on its own, by the way, for me.
Well, I'm on the Tout Wars committee, and part of it is just trying to get out of town on Sunday Sunday evening. So that's why we did it. They were staggering it 1 hour apart from the NL one, so that way we can make sure they both get off smoothly. I do Tout Wars AL, and it's a morning auction. I'm flying in from the West Coast on Friday and doing a 9 a.m. Saturday morning auction East Coast time. So, but yet I love it. I love starting off the day like that. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, and by the way, the time of day, to me, makes a big difference. I've noticed that the afternoon, evening auctions are so much hotter than the morning ones. So, and the bids go so much more. And, of course, if you know how to play an auction here, when it's a hot auction, it means you're going to find more value in the middle if you be patient and scoop up those middle values, because everybody's going $6, $7 over at the top. Just wait, you'll scoop up the middle. The opposite, in a cold auction, so in the morning that happens more, if you don't actually bid high and get those guys at $1, $2 over value, you're going to end up with, you're going to miss out on this guy in the middle, miss out on this guy in the middle, and you're going to end up having too much money, and you're going to get mediocre players. So you got to push the money earlier. The time of day makes a huge difference.
Well, yeah, and who you're playing with too. I mean, I keep going to Tout Wars as our example. AL Tout Wars is a very mature league, and there's usually 8 or 9 repeating players in that league, if not more. And we've all done auctions before. So my point is, sometimes your pocket of bargains is the top tier of players, or maybe the second tier players, rather than the middle. Maybe if you've got 3 people hoarding their money, guess what? They're going to be bidding like crazy. The guys that they think they're going to get $12 players that are really worth 15. They're going to end up spending 17 sometimes on those players, and because they're competing with each other. You really have to monitor the room on that one there.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you a follow-up on that. How much do other players' tendencies affect your auction strategies? Because, I mean, if you know that there's in this particular draft, there's 4 players who like middle, as opposed to a different auction where you know that, it's really hot, does that affect the way that you prepare in terms of, what you're going to plan to buy?
Normally, I would say no, Ariel, but Doug Dennis is in my dome right now because he has a different plan. It's not the style that gets me. It's the fact that he has run an effective plan 2 years running and 3 years running, really. He's won the last 2 AL Tout Wars by punting starting pitching. And, it's like, how do I counteract that without torpedoing my own team? Do I, that there's a really fine line. And I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about that. And yes, so knowing your pool matters, knowing what people like. Another example is the great Lenny Melnick has always been a guy that's never going to bid on closers. He's never going to spend money on closers. You know that going in. So, and he'll usually nominate them too. So you don't need to nominate a closer. He'll do it for you. So, and you know that you're going to get that closer for maybe $1 or $2 less than market because there's just $30 being spent on closers because he's not going to be the guy spending on them.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you know the tendencies of the audience, but sometimes you don't. Do you find yourself ever scouting players, maybe seeing what they've done elsewhere, talking to them, getting tells, researching their work? Like, how much does scouting actually play into your hand here?
Honestly, not much. If you have bandwidth to do that and you trust your reads and they're accurate, well, great. But I think you're spending a lot of time on that with very little return in many cases, absent extraordinary circumstances. I think there are certain, if you're in a long-standing league with people and you can kind of read them better, maybe that's great. If someone's had a really good track record of success, yeah, you better pay attention to what they're doing. How does Larry Schechter do it again? How did Ron Chandler do it again with the Lima plan? By God, I better know what to do with those. But if there's no history in the league, then I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time scouting my opposition.
But it does pay. But it does pay to see who's in the league because you may recognize a name, and sometimes it happens that you see someone that you do know, and that helps. That's great. But I mean, you should have an idea. If you say, "Oh wait, that name looks familiar to me," look it up. So, it doesn't hurt to do 2 minutes of research on them. If anything, it gives you some background, so you have an idea of what you're getting yourself into.
And it's easier to do now than ever because of Twitter. I mean, you can just go on, and go to their article, or especially if we're in. Home, and I'm using the fantasy community as the example, and that's not as always readily apparent when you're playing in an NFBC auction or you're playing in your home league. Obviously, they don't have published material out there with players that you like and dislike or reasons why you don't like a certain player, things of that nature. I mean, but we have the burden, and it's an honor, really. It's of being an open book. I mean, people, we know what we like. We're trying to help people do well in leagues. We better not be holding back. It's our job to try to explain who we like and who we dislike and why. If we're holding back, that means we're denying our best work for our customers, so we can't do that.
How important is it to look around at the players when you're at a live auction table? Because I've been to auctions, and I've seen some people, and they look at their numbers, and they're looking, and they don't look up. They don't really care. They're just doing their own thing. And then I see some players who all they're doing is looking around and seeing and working the room. Like Tim McLeod, I know when I was at the XFL 2 years ago, I noticed, and I'm like, Tim McLeod is looking the whole time. Well, where are you on that? And how important do you think it is to at least gauge at some point what the room feels like?
I mean, XFL, we're not allowed to have a laptop in front of us, so you better be looking the room, better be working the room, right? What else are you going to look at? You don't have numbers. I think I think this is a social game. I mean, I want to be able to engage with my competitors. I want to kind of get an eye. Again, you're a poker player. You've proven that. You play the player sometimes and not the cards. So I think it's really important. It's one of the many skills. Obviously, you sometimes have to look at your materials. You can't always be locking in, making eye contact there, but it helps, like everything else.
Yep.
And you mentioned about using a computer by writing by hand. Some people are using computer. Some people have a 1-person team, 2-person team. Just getting an idea of who has a better control of what they're doing. Sometimes the auction, yes, it goes slower than a snake draft, but it does speed up toward the end. And when it speeds up, sometimes writing by hand or using the computer or having a 1 or 2 team team can make the big difference. And just knowing who has what is a big difference.
Sure.
I'm always amazed when I go to see Tout Wars and Labor. Jeff Zimmerman, I always take him to be this computer guy, and he comes to the auction with this giant cardboard of listing every single. I just find that amazing. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, well, I've seen a lot of times. Some people are, he writes the process. Sometimes part of his process is, the writing it out of it is what gets you prepared, right? As opposed to just relying, I can find it. He's actually found it already. He's marked it down.
Yeah, that's true. Jeff, what are the 3 most important things that one should keep track of during an auction?
I didn't break it down 1 to 3, but, obviously, I think just the first thing is tracking what you have. Do you have balance? Do you have a certain category? Is there anything that do you have a weakness in your roster construction? Second, obviously, is managing your money and knowing like, okay, what do I have to spend? And the third is trying to get an idea how that compares to everybody else.
Moving?
I'm going to say money, money, and money. Money, you came into the draft that you allocated for certain spots that you may have to move around during the course of the draft. Money you have left that you have to make sure to spend wisely so you don't overspend and be locked out of a certain player that you want. And money that other people have left. Do you want the hammer at the end of the draft? Do you want to be able to outbid somebody? Is this person looking for a certain position and you have more money than them, so you're going to get that certain player? So I think money is the key.
Yeah, I mean, category balance, obviously, you need to. It's up there. And, what closers are remaining, who's the options available. Very important. The 3 things I would say is, number 1, you need to be aware of your money plan and who are the best options at each position. Okay, I have a $5 outfielder spot. Who are my 3 top outfielders? So who I got to nominate first to get him, or who I have to look out for? What catchers are up for me in where I think I'm going to play? You have to know what your top options are at the dollar amounts you plan to play out at the positions that you want to. It's number 1. Number 2 is auction temperature. You have to know and you have to keep track of, is it hot? Is it cold? Are players really going over and I can be patient? Or, no, this is where to strike. You got to be aware of, this is my strike time. Here we go. We got to do it now. Timing is very important. And who to nominate. Always have, my next nomination is this. Or I got to nominate this guy or this guy. You have to have it important. I mean, in a snake draft, you always come up with, all right, I'm probably picking this guy next. Do that in an auction. Decide who is my top choice to nominate and have that ready to go.
Yeah, I like having a running list too. And you have to have different motivations for your nomination. I'm glad you brought the nominations up because I think it's, some people, this is where you can find some tendencies. Larry Schechter almost always nominates players he's interested in, for instance. Brilliant auctioneer, brilliant player, but you can tell when he wants a guy. That is one thing you can tell. Others will always bring up a guy early on, they will always bring up a guy they don't want. Sometimes I like to bring up an end game guy early just to throw people off the scent. Sometimes I like to kind of deplete a category or deplete a position, even if I've already gotten it, or maybe just sometimes it's another motivation I'll have is I'll throw out a closer just to test the market rate on closers to find out. Maybe I get that closer, maybe not, but at least I want to have an idea of what the market is.
Yeah, the nomination strategy, let's talk about it now a little bit more, it's very important.
Yep.
Magnus Carlsen, who's the best chess player in the world, will tell you that really the most important rule is that every move should have a purpose. Just don't move up a pawn, right? Decide that, okay, I'm going to defend. Okay, I'm going to attack a piece. Oh, I'm going to improve the position. And you see the benefits of each. And of course, it's a priority list. Well, I have to defend this piece first before I attack another. I don't have to improve this piece. I have something else more pressing. So it's decide the purposes of a couple of different options and then pick the one that's the highest priority. And to me, nominations are that. There are some times where you have to have information about a player where my strategy is contingent on it. I got to know if I'm going to get this guy at a reasonable value. Otherwise, I got to pivot. If you got to get that information out, you probably have to nominate him earlier than you should. You can't wait for it to come out because your plan pivots on it. So that's a place where you want to. What if you spent a couple of you got a couple of high corners to start the draft? Well, you're going to have too much money. You don't need corners. You want to prioritize possibly, well, let's throw out another third baseman because I can't use him. I'm not going to spend the money. I want to get more towards the even pack. I'm under on the money. I want to go back to the pack. How much does that factor in? Do I want to test the closer market, as you said, Jeff? How important is that to do now? Well, there's 2 positions to fill. I need catcher and second base left. Which one's the bigger priority? Well, which one do I have more options? Do I have fewer options? Nominate that first, right? Whatever it is, I'm telling you, and there's no one strategy, right? It's not just nominate everybody you don't like. Have a purpose for everything. There's going to be defensive and offensive moves, and decide the priority on everything.
But you have to be careful with who you nominate, because if you're nominating something that you do want to get the feel of how much that position or that area is going to go for, don't nominate it in a hot room. Because if you nominate in a hot room, no matter what, that player is going to go for more than he normally should. So you have to get a feel for the room when you are nominating the player. Otherwise, the plan may backfire.
Oh, I totally agree. I think there's another situation you should be aware of too is, first of all, not everything goes according to our plan. We'd like it to, but there are things that throw us off. Sometimes you get in a situation where there's a limited number of a quantity that you need. Let's just say it's a middle infielder that's like a $10 middle infielder. There's 3 of them left and there's 4 people with money to spend on it there. I think instead of trying to wait out your competition, sometimes it's good to rip off the Band-Aid and nominate one of those players right away. Maybe your competition wants player C instead of player B or A, even though they're like maybe within a dollar's worth of your projections of each other. Sometimes you just take player A and get them at the reasonable price, the +1 that Ariel's talking about in a hot zone, as opposed to waiting it out and then getting stuck having to overbid on that last remaining one.
Yeah, I call it the Plan A, Plan B. I mean, it just came up last week. We had Salvador Perez, and we've mentioned that Salvador Perez is a bargain. We also like Wilson Contreras. Those are, perceived bargains. Maybe we like Salvador Perez a little bit more, a little bit bigger bargain, right? So our Plan A is Salvador Perez. Our Plan B is Contreras. We did not nominate Perez fast enough, and Contreras came out. And then he came up to the value. Maybe he was going at what we would pay, but then he went 1 over, and our question is, do I pull the trigger on him? I don't know if Sal Perez is going to be as good a bargain as we think. We just don't know. If Perez came out first, then we would know, okay, well, we either like the bargain or don't. If not, there's a backup plan, but you don't know unless the order comes out. So very, very often I'll agree with Larry Schechter that you want a guy, you nominate him because that information is probably worth more than you think. All right, so let's talk about market values, and I think it's very important before you have a draft, an auction to prep. Well, you're going to have your own values, your own constructed. You're going to take a projection system and use an auction calculator, and it's going to tell you a list of values, or you're going to make them up yourself. You're going to say, I think he's a $15 player. I think he's a $20 player. Whatever method is fine. It's your game. You make your own players that you're comfortable with, but I think it's very important to get a sense of how the market will behave. Jeff, how do you construct market values, or how do you know what you think the opponents are going to bid so that you can really base a plan and gauge what's a bargain or not?
It's a good question, because I think sometimes you can fool yourself into thinking certain things can happen. I mean, you want to look at previous auction results if you can, especially in you play in tout, but you can view the labor results, for instance. And if there are some people that are in both leagues, all the better. You look at that and you can get an idea of okay, well, these top aces went for that. This guy's still in my league, and he got one of them. Okay, great. Other times, I mean, you're really relying on people being like-minded, and that's usually not accurate. Usually there are some variances there.
Yeah, you'll never get a perfect read on the market. You can only assess what you think on average it goes for. Ecosystems like the NFBC, it's a lot easier because they publish these fantastic ADP. I mean, they've got hundreds of drafts going on, and that creates just a very robust set of values. Now, if you're playing in an auction, you want to use auction values. It's the auction show. If you have a set of AAVs, if you're playing in the NFBC and you have it, or if you're playing on RT Sports and you have a set of AAVs, those are the best sources. Yes, you're going to have players who differ all the time. Sure. If you know the tendencies of a specific player, absolutely it's going to differ. But if you don't have that, I find myself taking the ADP and I match it to a curve. Like, take the auction results from last year. If you're in a home league and you had an auction, just rank the numbers. Like the top pick was $47, the next pick was $45, the next $46, and just literally match it up with the ADP, and that'll right away give you a dollar number that you can use as, oh, here's a market value I can consider.
I like that approach.
And then you take that number and you compare it to the numbers that you have in your own valuation, and then you can find the hot spots where you want to play in that, in which areas you want to play, because the hot spots that are going to be, I mean, the very high up, the players are going for overvalue. According to ADP, they're doing what they're supposed to, but according to your evaluation, they may be too expensive, so you don't want to get into that. So you'll able pre-draft, pre-auction, you'll be able to find which areas you want to be able to work in based on the ADP and your evaluation, and then the temperature of the room.
So just to elaborate a little bit more on what I was saying with the curve and constructing it, this year I was very honored and fortunate to proxy for Tim Cloud in the XFL. All right, and this is before projections are published, including my own. You're not even allowed to bring values to the table. It's preseason. Who knows what's going on before free agents sign? It's hard to assess value. So when I was preparing, I had conversations with Tim as to who do you like, who not. My big prep that I did was market. And I took a look at what ADP looked like, and I constructed from previous years what the remaining inflated numbers would be. Like, I spent time saying, okay, well, on average, this many keepers were kept, and it was kept at these prices. And what are the remaining values? And I took that and I sorted it, and I said, okay, well, the top one's going to go for about this, and the next one's going to go for about this. So when it came to the players that I thought I had a chance on, I said, you know what? I think this guy is worth at least $20. My ADP says it's going to go for 12. I think I'm going to get him. And I found a couple of guys like that, and sure enough, I was able to buy them because I did the prep in knowing, are they going to be fine for the market? Matching up curves in old auctions, very, very powerful tool. Another question, it's not just about your own values. If you value a guy and you have him worth 15, okay? The question is, you have to set up what's called the strike price. When do you say, I'm going to pull the trigger? Do you say, well, if it's 15, then my strike price is 13 or lower, I need a $2 discount? What if you're at the $30 level and there's a player worth 35? Do you say, well, my strike price is going to be 2 over because it's at the top of the curve? Like, how do you decide based on your value, Jeff, what is your bid, the maximum bid you'll go to?
I think it's just about whether I specifically want that player, or more importantly, I want that quantity. Do I want the high average power guy, or do I want the power speed combo guy? Do I want to? Is that the guy I'm willing to break my price level a little bit on? I think that's how I kind of determine it a little bit there. I have a list of targets usually when certain players I'd like to get that fit my build, because even though it's you talked about doing a snake draft and having a build. There's still a build in an auction too, and there's a certain way you want to construct your team. And certain players fit that better than others.
Okay, so you're putting sort of a premium on players that fit your build more. So whether you come up with an auction number that says 20 or 22, if it's a guy that matters more, you're going to add 2 or 3, and that's how you sort of tangentially get your strike price. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Right. Okay, it makes sense. Anything different?
Yeah, I think it differs room to room because where your strike price is for a certain play. Let's say you want a middle infielder at a certain price, and you only go with certain, and you want to get stolen bases out of it. If you see that stolen bases are going higher or are hotter in that draft, you may have to adjust your strike price during the actual auction because otherwise you'll be locked out of that player or that stat that you want. So yes, you can have a strike price going into this draft, going into the auction, but sometimes it has to change on the fly based on the auction itself.
Yeah, no doubt. Agree with both of you. Jeff, what do you consider for a hitter-pitcher split? A lot of people ask, well, what's the right hitter-pitcher split? Do you have a certain way you do it? Obviously, it's going to differ from mono league to mixed league, but do you come with a set number?
It differs in every draft I do. And sometimes it differs it differs in auction versus at the start of the auction sometimes. I will tell you that my ratio will be higher in Tout Wars this year in favor of hitters than it was in previous years. That is an adjustment. It's no shock here. I mean, we've all seen what Doug Dennis has done in that league, and we have to adjust accordingly. And I think, I just don't want to be in a situation where I'm just short of bats. I just think that's one of those things I'm going to change. But in my home league, it's different. And, in NL, it might be different. It might just be the player. Sometimes it's player pool driven.
Wow, that pesky Doug Dennis, he's such a powerful guy, literally changing the market on his methods. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Smart guy. Go
Yeah.
figure. Smart guy in our community.
Oh, absolutely. So I don't worry too much about what my hitter-pitcher split will be for the total dollars I'm going to buy because I'm buying guys on bargains, and sometimes there could be more pitcher bargains, and sometimes there could be more hitter bargains, and I might determine when I'm doing my plan as to, you know what, it looks like there's going to be better hitter bargains at this level and pitcher bargains at this level, and when I fumble around and say what adds up to 260, it could go either way. I'm more concerned about optics as far as my value sheet. And you always want to make sure that whatever, as best you can, your numbers correspond to, meaning like when you list out Acuna is worth 50 and Tatis is worth 37 and Judge is worth 36, whatever it is, you want to make sure that that hitter-pitcher split is going to mimic the auction. So in the NFBC, when they're much more pitcher-centric than your home league and the split is 62-38, you want to make sure that your numbers add up to 62-38, or maybe just at 1% more if maybe you're better at picking pitchers. So, okay, put a little bit more into the hitters, but in general, you want to keep it as close as you can to that. Now, you can buy 70%, 30%, but the optics of what appears on your paper, I think, is more important to make sure it's going to mimic the room. And you don't know for sure what it's going to be, but you can guess from prior history, from the type of auction, best you can.
And I also think you can also look at what you did in past years. Like if you look at last year and you were very successful, what was your hitter pitcher break that time? You can learn from that. If it wasn't successful last year, what did you do wrong? Where did you spend too much money? Where did you spend not enough money? Because the numbers aren't going to change that drastically that you can still learn something from last year and apply it to this year.
Let's talk stars and scrubs versus spread the risk. Everyone asks this question: should you go stars and scrubs? Should you go spread the risk? Maybe I do spread the risk for hitters and stars and scrubs for pitchers. Where are you, Jeff, on that whole discussion?
I think you should try each plan at least once in your life. I think you should do a stars and scrubs at one point in time and know who your scrubs are going to be. I think the thinner the league, the more likely I am to do a stars and scrubs. A 12-team mixed league auction, absolutely. Go stars and scrubs. Go crazy. Have fun with it. 12-team AL only league, mono league. Ooh, okay, now you're really talking about consequences here. But I do a golf auction every year, guys, and I've done it both, where it used to be really paid to be stars and scrubs. As the player pool has improved and there are more and more good golfers out there, it's been one of those things where it's paid off to balance the risk a little bit more. I think you really should know what those try each at least once and have an idea what you're better at.
I really like that. Ruvain, what are your tendencies?
I think that I just mentioned exactly what Jeff said. If it's a 10-team league, stars and scrubs can work. I know me and you, Ira, we've tried it. It does work. It can work. But when you get to a 15-team league or 12-team, 15, if you do stars and scrubs, one injury for your team or two injuries could be catastrophic. Then you're going to be playing the waiver wire for the entire season, and there's almost no chance of catching up. So if you spread the risk in a deeper league, you have a better chance of lasting longer in the money categories if you're able to do that.
Yeah, in the deeper the league, especially in mono leagues, you don't want to end up with a lot of $1 players because it's about playing time, and about playing time. And the $1 players don't get the playing time. Even the $7 players, $6 players do. So you want to try to avoid that kind of thing. Look, I go into every single auction, and I don't have a tendency one way or the other. I'm prepared to do both. I know myself, my tendency is more spread the risk, so I have a strong intuition that it's going to go that way. But I'm prepared to do either. And again, take the auction temperature. If it's cold, you got to play more stars and scrubs. If it's so hot, you're going to find so much value with spread the risk. So I think the answer is be prepared to do both. Do you ever try, Jeff, unconventional strategies? Doug Dennis did, obviously, and it was successful. Do you ever try, I'm going to punt saves, I'm going to punt steals? Do you ever intentionally try to do that?
Sometimes intentionally and sometimes unintentionally. I won the 18-team RotoWire Staff Keeper League last year, finishing last in stolen bases. I didn't try to do it necessarily. In fact, I traded for Starling Marte in our league midseason. He played all of like one game for me before getting hurt, so that was fun. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to steer into this. Fortunately, my other hitting categories were strong. I think punting categories, sometimes, focusing on certain teams' rotations or avoiding others, all these things kind of are fun to do. Absolutely, you should try them. I don't often go that route. I don't do the unconventional strategy that often. I think maybe I should do it more often.
Well, I've never tried to do that intentionally, and yes, sometimes you realize, oh crap, well, at this point I better punt. It's funny, Ruven and I did an auction the other day, and we just ended up not getting the bargains on steals and sort of unintentionally punted steals. And I was listening to your show with Fred Zinke the other day, the RotoWire podcast, and I'm actually happy to hear that if you're going to punt, it might as well be steals because steals are more available on the waiver wire. Power, not really, and I'm glad that I just said, let's just pound power. Even our subs, we didn't even make an attempt to, let's just get a bunch of guys who could steal. We just said, get those power guys. So I'm really happy to hear that Fred Zinke came up with that.
Fred's a smart human, that's for sure.
Yes. Well, 2 years ago in TGFBI, I decided to do pocket aces. I've never done that before. I wanted to see just how it works. It can work. If you try something in a free league, instead of paying money and losing money on it, try it in a free league. Try something you've never done before, and if you do it that way, you can see how it plays out during the auction, how it plays out during the course of the year, and if it fits the way you're able to play. If you're able to handle it, then great, you could do it. But otherwise, you have to try everything at least once before you can knock it.
Right, and I'd say one other addendum to this: if you're trying something unconventional, identify who the pivotal players are in your strategy. Identify if you're going stars and scrubs, know which scrubs and which positions you're going to go to get those after. Like maybe you're in a 1-catcher league instead of a 2-catcher league. By all means, go with a $1 catcher in a league like that. But identify those targets too. Identify like, okay, if I'm going to do a league, I'm going to say, for instance, I'm going to go punt batting average in this league. I'm going to go with a bunch of high power and some power speed guys, or just I'm going to focus on those. I need to know which of those guys I really need to get. Who are the ones that the league is going to discount because they hit for low average? If you're going to go that route, really identify who are the pivotal players to that strategy.
Absolutely. Let's talk about money management. Do you make it a point, Jeff, to pace yourself during the auction? Are you conscious? Okay, I'm spending too much money. Oh no, I have too much money. How does that come up in terms of what you look for in the auction?
It still happens to me even now that I sometimes overspend early on. I get caught up in the moment. I find too many bargains early without realizing that maybe they're not bargains, especially like, oh, this whole room is discounting starting pitching, but I got Jose Urquidy at such a great price. Wasn't a great price. It happens. So yes, you should take a breath every once in a while. Absolutely. I mean, I guess that kind of runs counter to my other strategy is that I'm involved in every player. I guess that sometimes it may be more difficult to take that bird's eye view if you're really involved all the time. Maybe I should step back every once in a while.
So I think in general, yes, you should pace yourself because the economics tell you that you want to, as most as you can, have the same purchasing power as anyone else. If you have too much money, you're going to have a different purchasing power than everybody else, and you could overspend. If you don't have enough money, you're going to miss some good bargains when they come up because you just can't afford it. So everything else being equal, yes. But the question you should ask yourself, rather than just pace yourself at the auction, is to say, okay, if I go for this guy now and it's X bargain now, the question is, will I get that bargain later? Or is it, this is the best I can do, right? I don't think you have to pace yourself. I think you have to ask the question, is this the best bargain I can get, right? Oh, this guy's a $3 bargain. Yeah, but could I have gotten a $7 bargain? We bought Jose Abreu at the auction this past week, and we did it, we call it the Joey Votto nomination, where Jose Abreu, I have him worth $9. So I'll gladly take him for $1, but I'd rather somebody else get him for $4, because I don't really want him exactly, and I don't want a guy having an $8 bargain, so let's just throw him out earlier. And we threw him out for $1, crickets, we win him. Well, at that point, an $8 bargain, what $1 player are you going to get a better bargain than $8? I'm totally cool with that. So that was like a good, okay, let's spend the money here. But so that it's the question you need to ask yourself all the time. Ruve?
Yeah, and budgeting yourself and making sure you don't overspend early doesn't mean you shouldn't spend at all. That's the main thing. Just because you have to pace yourself doesn't mean you shouldn't spend the money that you think are bargains. And that's exactly what you're saying. If it's a $1 you want to do, or it's a $20 player that you think is worth 25 and you're getting for 20, even though you may be low on money, that's, if it fits your plan and it makes sense, then there's no reason not to do it. Number one. Number two, most auctions have a break. They're usually 1 or 2 breaks. You can reassess what you need to do, reassess the money, and that's where you can really pace yourself. You can say, you know what? I have too much money left. I got to start spending now, otherwise I'm going to have money left on the table. Or I have too much money, or I spent too much money. I have to slow myself down. So you can use those breaks to your advantage and just take take a picture of the room and see how much money does everyone else have? How much money do they have to spend? What are they looking for? And you can pace yourself that way.
By the way, I find that when you come back from a break, people are somewhat gun-shy, and you can get some good bargains right away. I remember we did the NFBC auction last year, Ruvain, and we're like, okay, there's a couple of guys here. Let's throw out a guy we want. I think we're going to get the bargain we want. And I think we bought 3 players in a row coming right out of the break. That's just a quick tip that I think. Did you notice that, Jeff? Have you seen that?
Oh, 100%. I think it's absolutely true. First couple players, sometimes even the very first couple players in the auction too, the overall auction, but absolutely coming back from a break. Some people are settling in. They're checking their email that they haven't checked and all that. Okay, we're back going here, and what just happened? Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Anytime there's a change, people get thrown off. I often say that I hypnotize people in the auction, but if you subtly know how to create a diversion in the room in a nice way, not but get people minds off things, and maybe there's a change in the room, a well-timed joke, it sort of creates a disruption, and you can get a bargain on your next pick. Believe it or not, that actually works. Question in drafts. Let's talk about in-draft adjustments. Jeff, what are the in-draft adjustments that you find yourself making the most?
It's tracking the scarcities, like tracking how many closers that you like are left, or tracking how many, tracking your dollars, tracking certain quantities. In a keeper auction, tracking the inflation. Is it really what you thought anticipated? Is there inflation among certain categories? Knowing that is really important.
Do you track, forget about keeper, but for regular redraft, do you track in-draft inflation? I know some people say it exists and some people track it, and some people like me, I don't track it because I know the feel of the room. Do you track it?
I do not.
Okay. Right. Same here.
But sometimes you could see it happen. You can see Steel's guy going for $2-3 more. You can see. I know. I
agree
actually
with
can,
that.
You can see closers. The top 3 closers are going for $3-4 more. So you can track inflation, I think, for certain statistics. But positions, I don't think it's that easy to do. I think statistics can be tracked for inflation.
All right, so let's talk bidding. What is your general procedure that you bid on, Jeff?
Well, I will early in auctions. I like to accelerate it. I like to get it up higher to where it's going to be. Nothing drives me battier than Ronald Acuna 1, 2, 3. No, get it to where it's going to go. Come on. So I'll do that. I'll jump bid frequently early on. You got to be careful about slowing down mid auction. Making sure that when you're jump bidding, it's not a disaster if you're stuck with the player. But I tend to be off. Sometimes I won't always go fast, but sometimes I will go fast. But I think you need to vary your cadence. I think vary everything. Vary your nominations, vary your cadence, vary your bidding style. Try to throw people off the scent.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you've seen me in auctions. I vary the pitch of my voice. Number 2, 3. Yep. Totally. You want to just throw people off. And the more things you do differently, the less they can track. I don't want them knowing what I want, thinking what I want. You definitely don't. I was going to ask you, what is your opening bid? My answer for the opening bid is I don't do random. I pick the same number, right? 20, 20, 20, just to make it monotonous. That, all right, well, I guess Ariel's just bidding 20 because he always says 20. I can't tell anything about whether he wants the player or not.
17 here. It's always 17. It's
Perfect.
Prime number. I like it. I don't know. It just has a nice ring to it.
And then when you get in a bidding war with somebody, if you jump by 2 at a certain point, sometimes that'll stop the person. Like, let's say you're willing to spend $18 on a player, and that's 15. Next person goes 16. If you jump to 18 or 19, they're not always willing to go that extra dollar and say 20 because they may not think that the player is worth 20. So sometimes the $2 jump, especially going from like the teens to 20s or 20s to 30s, can make a difference.
Yeah, the key numbers are really important fact, Ruvain. Absolutely, 20, 30. Both of those are big. If it's at 25 and you go to 29, that might stymie it. Or if you just go to that number, if you go, hey, I'm going to 30, I'm not afraid of 30, they may stop them in their tracks too.
So on the jump $2 bids, I have a very interesting take here that I found that it works like half the time. Like sometimes you jump at 2, and sometimes everyone just, well, I don't want to go any further because you've jumped at 2. And sometimes, well, they go over anyways. But either way, I feel good about myself. Because if let's say you go 2 over and the guy beats you, you say to yourself, well, thank God I jumped at 2. If I would have jumped at 1, then that guy would have gone just 1 over. I just got $1 out. But let's say you win it, well, then you say, great, look at me. I did it right. I jumped at 2. I got him. So either way, you feel good about yourself,
And even better, sometimes you want them to top you after that, and you're just accelerating that process.
Right. Now, you touched on it earlier that you bid often on players, and I totally agree with you. I don't see why people are quiet for so often. I often see players in an auction where they only bid on a few, and it's pretty obvious that what they want to bid. Can you just elaborate on the frequency of bidding?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're involved in every player, how could they tell which player you want? I mean, I think that's one thing. But also, you just get a feel for the room. If your heads up, you're bidding on a player, you're noticing who's involved in the bidding. Guess what? You can also, if you have a good memory for that thing or ability to take notes and say, okay, I was bidding against Glenn on this one here. Well, I can always come back to Glenn in a trade league too about that. So it's useful information to do that. So that's another reason to be involved. And most importantly, again, auctions are fun. Be involved in them, play in them. And the best way to do that is just be active in them. I mean, maybe it's your style to be quiet in the background. Maybe you're intimidated because, R.L. Cohen's over there, shouting sometimes and then talking quietly other times. And that's intimidating. Maybe and then maybe you want to stay back a little bit. And that's fine. But I like just being in the mix, cracking jokes, bidding a lot more. I think it's the spirit of the thing.
Oh, totally. Ruvain, I want to ask you about timing. When should you time your bids? Should you immediately jump when a bid is out? Should you wait until it says going once, going twice? And of course, this question is sort of twofold because we're talking live in person, but also online. What are your thoughts?
Well, when it's live in person, I don't like waiting to go when it's going twice. I like to have people know that I am on for this person. So I don't wait for that because I don't want there to be any controversy whatsoever saying that, oh, you didn't get in, oh, you didn't get in. This is supposed to be fun. I, I have a number that I want to go to. I'm going to go to it, and I don't wait for the ones going twice. The top players, they will get there. Sometimes I'll wait until the bidding goes 30, 31, 32, 35. Then I'll chime in at the very end. But the lower guys, if you don't chime in early, you may end up losing.
Jeff?
You got to be careful on online auctions about waiting to +2. Sometimes you don't get it in on time, and like, hey, I got my bid in. Nope, tough breaks. Too bad. And you don't want to, honestly, you don't really want to annoy the room as being the going twice guy all the time. We turned one guy in the Staff Keeper League. We turned his last name into a verb because he was known for doing that all the time. And it was all in good fun, but at the same time, yeah, it's annoying when you get that all the time, and it extends it out. I mean, it's just like if you want the guy, go bid on him.
I think that you should be bidding immediately. I think one key component, and it works both online and in person, is I want less time for others to think. If I know my numbers and I know where I want to go, why do I want to give somebody else a chance to think? I want somebody not to think. So if you bid quickly, and even if you get up to your price, faster, that's fine. You bid what you want, but it gives less people to think, and that means less people are involved. I don't want to be in a bidding war with 14 others. I want to be in a bidding war with 2 or nobody. So, again, I talk about hypnotize. And by the way, when I say hypnotize, I'm not going, you will fall asleep, although maybe that would work. But hypnotizing in general, the definition of hypnosis is intense concentration with losing a sense of where you are. It's where you concentrate on the immediate task, but you get lost in the shovel. And anytime I can have people just concentrate on one thing and lose focus of what I'm doing, that is hypnosis. I want people off the game thinking about what are they going to do next, just throwing away, all right, I'm not going to think about this person, or I do want to think about this person, but I want to have them have intense concentration about one thing and not really be multitasking. That's really what I want to do with hypnosis.
And there's another thing also when it comes to online auctions. If you nominate a player real quick, sometimes other players are not ready for that. And sometimes you want to nominate the player a little bit slower. You want to wait a little bit. You want to have people give people time to think about who you're going to nominate. You can take advantage of the auction like that also.
Have to ask about price enforcing, because some people will say don't price enforce because you can get stuck with them too much and you'll be doing it too often. But of course, the theory is certainly if you can price enforce, why would I want somebody to get somebody for $10 when I can have that guy get him for $12? What's your take on that, Jeff?
Well, I just want to make sure you got to make sure it's not a disaster if you get them. I think otherwise I'm all about it, because there are times when you'll get that player and yeah, it might have been a bargain, but it screws you in the end game. In the mid to late game, you price and force on you have a guy that's worth $9 and he's stuck at $6. Okay, or he's stuck at $5, you go $6. Great, you got a $3 value, but guess what? You're down to $2 max bid on somebody else, or a $3 max bid later on, and somebody else could pick off three $3 players that you like. Meantime, there, and you're like, and I don't really need this guy. We'll call him Jose Urquidy again.
Just calling him Jose Urquidy.
Well, we had that last year in our NFBC. We wanted to price and force Anthony Rizzo. He was going for a very cheap price. We didn't really want him. We had corners already, but we're like, we can't let this go for this value. So we just kept bidding until we ended up getting him, I think, for $8 or $9, something like that. And sometimes the price enforcing, you will end up with the player. Just make sure that you can handle it in your roster. Otherwise, it'll screw up the rest of your draft.
Yeah, you never want to make a bid that you can't afford, right? You don't want to make a bid that just will screw you up or you can't afford and, that's going to cripple me right now. I can't get the rest of the bargains. But, yeah, in general, if you can, and obviously it's much better to do in person than online because you can see the people. But, I mean, you're playing poker. You have to suffer some bad beats because there's an end game, right? If you don't do your price enforcing in poker, you're going to end up missing out on a lot of pots, right? So there has to be some element of the psychology of it. Otherwise, you won't be able to actually get some major bargains later, right? You need people to artificially spend more money than they're willing to go.
Yeah, that's right. In poker, you got to get caught bluffing every once in a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we've touched on a lot of topics here, and I mean, is there anything else to bring up about auctions in terms of gameplay, strategy, planning? Anything you'd like to add to the discussion, Jeff?
Just pay attention to what other people are nominating. It's not just important what you're nominating. It's important if other people display tendencies with their nominations. You can kind of anticipate with that. Maybe you hold off on a certain player because you know they're going to do it for you, or you know that hey, Larry really likes players he brings up. I'll price enforce here. I won't price enforce there.
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely something to keep track of. I mean, I remember I was playing Tout Wars the very first time, and I noticed Ian Khan only brought up players he did not want. And that tells you something. Or Jeff Zimmerman, you play with him, and he's throwing out a DH because he wants to clog DH spots. Very important. Oh, how about clogging DH? What about that strategy? Do you think it's a good idea to start with that, and this way people can't utilize their util?
I think there's some value to that. I think if you're in an AL only league, I shouldn't say that anymore. It used to be in an AL only league, just fine. Stick me with David Ortiz, make me suffer, fine. I've never gone broke rostering David Ortiz, but now that changes with universal DH. But I would say still matters in an only that flexibility matters a lot more. In a mixed league, it does matter, but not as much. I think that the replacement pool of players is much stronger. Whereas in an AL, and you've got your utility spot clogged, and it's not with a dominant player, then you're really that's suboptimal roster management.
Yeah, but make sure for the clogging the DH, make sure you don't nominate that Byron Buxton for $1 and you end up with him for $1, or don't nominate a DH if you already have a DH first of all, you're not allowed to, but it's bad etiquette to not know the rules of the league. But I mean, in general, it does help to know what's going on in the room. It helps to have fun during the course of the auction. The whole point of the thing is having fun. Go into the auction with 2, 3, 4 plans, because whatever your original plan is going to be, it's probably not where you're going to end up with. So make sure you're able to pivot plan to plan during the course of the auction.
It's funny. We were in the auction the other day, and somebody had Shohei Ohtani. They got him, sure, no problem. And then I see they bid on Byron Buxton, and I'm like, wait a minute, how's that going to work? Because aren't they both DHs? And then I said to myself, oh, wait a minute, Ohtani actually still qualifies as a pitcher in a lot of these formats, even though he's not going to play pitcher this year. But you can actually technically draft him because he played as a pitcher last year, and if you can almost decide, do I want to have an extra hitter or extra pitcher? I tend to do that last year. I got Ohtani in labor, and I thought, this is great because for my very last pick, I can go either way. That still works this year because he still qualifies. So that's an interesting thing. And that's specific to an auction, by the way. You won't have that kind of dynamic in a draft.
And it's also specific to your league rules on Ohtani, too, for that matter. Whether there's Tout Wars, there's the 2 Ohtanis. So you have to be very super careful about that. But, yeah, absolutely. Know your league specs. Always important.
Yes. Anything else we're missing, guys?
I don't think so. I think we nailed it pretty well. I think, listen, if you haven't done it, do it, try it. It's worth it. It's worth entertainment value. Just like the draft and football leagues are entertainment value, this is entertainment value. If you're doing it live, you get to be with your friends, or if you know people, you become a community. If you go to the same NFBC draft auction over and over again, you know people, you say hello, you become friends. It's a way to, just have fun.
Yeah. The thing I'll leave you with is that, remember, if you have $260 at the auction and you buy a $15 player for $15, and you buy a $20 player for $20, and you buy a $2 player for $2, and you buy people at par value the whole way up, you'll end up with a roster of $260 worth of players. That is not bad, right? It's not good, though. It's an average team. You'll finish mid-pack. You want to buy players at bargains according to your own values, right? You want get a guy for 3 less, for 4 less, for 2 less, for 1 less. At the top, sure, go 1 or 2 over. But if you don't get bargains on most of your players, you're not going to end up with a good team. You're going to end up with an average team. All right. Well, that is the end of the episode. Before we go, I wanted to thank, of course, Jeff Erickson for coming on the podcast. Why don't you just tell everybody where we can read your stuff, listen to you, and all things Jeff Erickson?
Yeah, I talk too much, guys, so you can find me a lot of places. I'm on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Beginning on the 19th of February, I'll be back to daytime, 12 to 2 Eastern Time. Myself and Nick Whalen. I'll also be on the Sunday show as well with Todd Zola. I do 3 podcasts a week with RotoWire, Sunday night typically, and then Tuesday with Fred Zinke, and Thursday with the guest of the industry. The Sunday night one with Scott Genstad, who is amazing and awesome. Both Scott and Fred make me smarter, and that's an accomplishment, so I'm proud of them for that. I mean, they're I have a lot of room to grow, and they help me grow, so it's really fun. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Erickson, and check out all of our work at RotoWire. RotoWire.com/pod will get you a free peek behind the paywall. No credit cards there required, guys. Just a valid email address. Off you go. Give you a taste of the site. Hopefully, you want to subscribe.
And I have to tell you that I listened to all 3 of those editions, and they're all distinct, by the way, a week. And I never get tired of listening to Jeff Erickson. I mean, he's just fantastic. You've listened to the show right now, so you know what he sounds like. Definitely, if you haven't heard the podcast, it's a different flavor every week, plus the Sirius XM show, which I catch when I can. Definitely listen to Jeff. Great stuff, great content, and fantastic voice. What about you, Ruvain?
You can follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come. I also have a weekly injury article on RotoBaller discussing all the injuries and on when the players will be back and who's next up.
And my name's Ariel Cohen. I'm on Twitter at ATCNY. You can read my stuff over at Fangraphs at RotoBaller. The ATC projections are up. They're out on a bunch of sites, on RotoBaller, on Fangraphs, CBS Sportsline, and now this year, also on RotoWire. So another reason to sign up for RotoWire as well. For more information about an auction, I did a presentation over at PitchCon on auction strategies. So check it out. It's part of the PitchCon presentations of 2024. You can take a look at it on the Pitcher List YouTube channel. I definitely urge you for more information. Don't miss out on that one. All right, once again, thank you so much to Jeff Erickson for coming on the show. Hope you thought this was helpful for you. And from everyone here at Beat the Shift, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.